So guys, let me tell you the story of Stanley. He is a man who is incredibly lucky, so lucky that he can kill anyone with a single hit, and all the evidence against him just disappears on its own. But there is one specific man that this lucky power doesn't work on, and he is out to kill Stanley. You'll find out more about that later. At the start of our story, we see Stanley, who has just finished his time serving in the army and has come back home. His family is busy finalizing his sister's wedding. After that, Stanley goes to college, where his friend Jeff gives him some advice to stay away from things like gambling and drugs. When he's back home, Stanley spends his time watching videos of Canada because he's planning to move there in just a few days. He even thinks about putting a picture of the Rocky Mountains on his wall and tries to use water from a bottle to make it stick, but it doesn't work. Later on, Stanley goes to his job at a shop. There's already a man there arguing about getting a refund for something. Stanley goes back to his Canada videos and finishes some small chores. Just then, a drunk customer walks in and starts acting really rude to Stanley, demanding that he bring a beer outside. Stanley says no because the man hasn't paid yet. Seeing this, the drunk man's friend says sorry for the behavior and pays for the beer himself. A bit later, Stanley's boss shows up. Stanley asks if he can borrow a hammer to take home, but the boss just ignores him. So, Stanley decides to take the hammer anyway and starts walking home. On his way, he sees that rude man from the shop lying on the ground. A little further down the road, he notices the man's friend quietly walking away. Stanley calls out and says, "Hey, your friend is lying over there," but the man just says he'll go home in a bit. Stanley keeps pushing and says he should really take his friend with him, and this makes the man fly into a rage. He starts beating Stanley up badly. In that moment, Stanley remembers how he used to be bullied in school and how he had to watch his friend Jeff get beaten up right in front of him. Back then, he couldn't do anything, but now he takes his hammer and hits the man right on the head. Soon it starts to rain, and the man falls down near a shop shutter. Right at that moment, a woman walking a dog sees Stanley, but it turns out she is blind. A few moments later, two kids come near but then turn back. Stanley grabs his bag and runs home, terrified about what will happen to his family if the police catch him. He starts having a vision of the man he killed, who says, "I have a sick mother and 3 kids at home. Who is going to take care of them now?" While Stanley is stuck in these thoughts, Jeff shows up and he is very drunk. Stanley asks him if he remembers the guys who used to bully them in school and says their lives must be a mess now. But Jeff tells him that one is a big businessman, the second has a government job, and the third is married. Stanley then notices the police taking someone away near his house and starts looking online to see if you get a shorter sentence for accidental killings. Morning comes, and Stanley suddenly remembers that he left the hammer, the murder weapon, right there at the crime scene. The next day, a policeman named Christopher comes to check things out. He stops in front of Stanley's shop, and 2 kids ask him for a lighter. Christopher takes them to the station instead and warns them about smoking. After looking at the shop's security footage, Christopher goes back to the shop and asks for the boy who was working the night before. Meanwhile, on his way to work, Stanley hears people saying there were no cameras where the 2 men died. When he gets to the shop, he meets Christopher. The cop says, "Those 2 were being rude to you all night, so you killed them, right?" Stanley asks why anyone would kill someone for such a small reason. Christopher says he was only joking and asks what they were talking about. Stanley mentions that one man said he had an old mother and 3 kids. Stanley wonders if he should mention the hammer. Just then, a man named Greg arrives and says the 2 men actually fought each other and a third person saw it happen. This proves they killed each other. We find out that when Stanley was asking for the hammer, a fly had landed right on the camera lens, so nobody could see what he was doing. But as he leaves, Christopher tells Stanley he shouldn't have talked about the case in front of the kid. Back at the station, Christopher wonders why there was no blood on the stone if the man used it to hit Michael. His partners say the rain probably washed the blood away. Later, the wife of a man named Daniel is brought in. She says she met Michael 3 years ago. She says he was kind and was the first person to ever celebrate her birthday. Michael loved her kids, and they were having an affair and planning to get married in a week. But after this happened, Christopher goes to Stanley and tells him he should have stood up to the man who was bothering him. After he leaves, Jeff arrives and asks why Stanley hasn't been coming to school. Stanley says there's trouble at home, so they go to get some juice. Meanwhile, Christopher finds out that Michael, the dead man, was actually a famous criminal called Yo Boy. He had killed a family for insurance money and hurt several girls while they were out hiking. Stanley sees this on the news and goes to sleep. Michael shows up in his dream again, asking about his mother and kids. But Stanley grabs him by the neck and says, "You hurt so many girls, I did the world a favor by killing you." Knowing the man was a criminal makes Stanley feel like he can walk around freely again. However, the hammer Stanley used is actually in someone's house. It belongs to the blind girl who passed him that night. Next, we see Christopher going to buy juice, but he sees 2 cups are missing from the box. He gets so angry that he throws the whole box away. Then he goes to a flower shop, but the owner is busy on the phone, so he leaves there too. We find out Christopher's father is very sick, and he wanted to give those things to him. Christopher goes to his office and hears they solved all their cases this month, and the manager says they'll all get promoted soon. On the other side, Stanley goes home and sees Michael's face again while taking out the trash. His mother takes him to church and tells him not to skip school because the school is complaining. She says they can live on his father's pension, so he should just focus on going to Canada to follow his dreams. Since Stanley's phone broke the day before, he buys a new one and goes to work. The blind woman with the dog shows up at the shop. She moves her glasses and shows that one eye is damaged, but she can see a little out of the other. She tells him, "Criminals like you should go to hell. I have your hammer, and if you want it back, you have to give me 20 lakh rupees." Then she leaves. Stanley runs home and looks for ways to make quick money online but finds nothing. He tries to sell his new phone, but the shopkeeper won't take it because he already put a screen guard on it. Stanley goes home and takes out 17 lakh rupees from his savings. He then asks his boss for an advance. The boss tells a story about another boy who gambled away in advance, but he decides to trust Stanley anyway. Meanwhile, we see Jeff and learn that Stanley also borrowed money from his friends. Later at work, the boss tells Stanley a blind woman is outside. Stanley goes out and finds a cigarette pack with her address inside. He goes to her house. The girl says she's been watching him and at first thought he was dangerous, but then realized it was an accident and he's actually a decent guy. She asks if he killed the other person too. Stanley says he only killed one. He shows her the money and asks if she'll leave him alone now. But the girl says that in Korea, hiding a murder weapon gets you 2 years in prison, and she won't take that risk for just 20 lakhs. She demands 20 lakhs every single month. Hearing this, Stanley grabs the hammer and says their business is over since he paid the first 20 lakhs. But the girl starts threatening him. She says his mother goes to church and wouldn't be allowed in if people knew her son was a killer. She mentions his sister's wedding might be canceled. Stanley panics. Then she tells him she hates people and only likes her dog, but she likes him, and if he acts like her dog and obeys her, she'll give him a discount. Stanley gets so angry that he hits her on the head with the hammer. She dies instantly, and Stanley leaves with his money and the hammer. Later, Christopher is talking to his boss, and we find out his father used to be a cop, but a criminal did something to him. This is why Christopher wants revenge for his father. On the other hand, we find out Stanley hasn't eaten in 5 days. He says the first day you're hungry, but after that, the hunger goes away and you're just thirsty. He's been ignoring calls from everyone. He wonders why the police haven't caught him yet. Meanwhile, a milkman sees a pile of milk packets at the girl's house and finds her dead body. He calls the police. Christopher finds that the dog started eating the girl's body because it was so hungry. They find an expensive TV, meaning she wasn't actually blind. Detective Park tries to catch the dog, but it's busy digging a hole. In that hole, they find 2 more bodies of people who went missing 5 years ago, but they don't know how the girl died. There was coffee in the house, no one drank, and the dog licked everything, so there were no fingerprints or DNA left. Elsewhere, Stanley tries to end his life with a rope, but he is too scared to do it. Jeff shows up, and Stanley throws money at him. Jeff punches him and says he was just worried and didn't want the money. Stanley confesses that he was the one who stole Jeff's tablet when they were kids. Jeff says he knew all along, but pretended not to, so their friendship wouldn't end. After Jeff leaves, Stanley cries. He watches the news and realizes there is no evidence against him for the 2 people he killed, and he feels they deserve to die anyway. Meanwhile, the dog is at the police station. The girl's family wants the dog put down. Detective Park is taking the dog to a center when 2 kids see him. These are the same kids Christopher caught smoking. One kid wants revenge because the detective put gum in his hair. He stabs Detective Park with a glass bottle and runs. The kids get scared and realize they have no cigarettes. Stanley happens to be walking by, and they try to rob him. Seeing them makes Stanley think of the blind girl and Michael, and he gets furious. When Stanley wakes up later, he is in his room. He remembers someone brought him home, but he finds a brick, his hammer, and a letter telling him to get on Telegram. Those two kids are now dead.